In this video, I will extrapolate on the idea or correlation between aliens, UFOs, and the occult. As we see, it all starts with the quote-unquote cover-up by world governments. When the governments started getting involved in the late 40s, early 50s, that's when a narrative started being pushed about what these beings or craft might be. In the following clip, we'll see George Knapp, an American television investigative journalist, conspiracy theorist, news anchor, and talk radio show host, talk about the secret government cover-up and UFOs. He is known for his work investigating UFOs early on in American media. He was and has become a sort of authority within the mainstream media on the subject of UFOs.
This week we've heard the contention of UFO researchers that there is a secret government within our government.
There's a secret government within our government.
While that may be hard to believe coming from the UFO perspective, we've certainly learned in Watergate and the Iran-Contra scandal that factions within our government can and do pursue their own hidden agendas outside of the law, outside the control of Congress, or the knowledge of the American people. This is exactly the type of operation we'll hear about tonight. It's a chilling scenario with worldwide implications that may have its roots right here.
The cover-up. In these following clips, we'll see some American presidents being asked about UFOs or aliens, and they all have a sort of indifferent or smug attitude about it, as if they really don't know, or maybe it's just a bit of a silly concept for them.
President Obama says that there is footage and records of objects in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he says we don't know exactly what they are. What do you think that it is?
I would ask him again. Thank you.
When it comes to aliens, there's some things I just can't tell you on air.
When it comes to aliens, there's some things I just can't tell you on air.
But what is true, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory.
We're back with President Bill Clinton, James Patterson. All right, President Clinton, first things first before we move on. UFOs. You've been the president. You've seen all the info. Are they real?
You know, they've given us an idea for our next book.
Well, what do you know? What can you tell us?
The truth is that we've never proved one, but there are things flying around up there that we haven't fully identified yet. And keep in mind, there are basically 1 billion galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. I mean, you can't even get your mind around the sheer number of things that are out there.
But you've seen this.
And
you've seen the data.
Well, no one knows, but I think that the probability is that there's something you would call life somewhere else.
Something you would call life somewhere else. All right, and this is the...
And over the years, we've seen the Vatican become involved with the possibility of the aliens, and this has woken up some conspiracy theorists to the idea that maybe aliens are being used to push some sort of agenda, whether that's governmental, spiritual, or what have you. But it is very interesting that the Vatican, a very powerful religious and governmental authority on the planet, is sort of coinciding with the globalist governments about the idea of aliens possibly existing.
Inside the walls of this castle, an unassuming Jesuit from Argentina leads the Vatican astronomical research and has recently caused an uproar by opening a debate about aliens.
In a universe so big, huge, I would say, as the one where we live, with 100 billion of galaxies, with each galaxy with 100 billion of stars. probably with many of these stars having planets, it could be possible that life could evolve as the way we know on Earth.
Father Funes says he is not sure if other forms of life would be more or less intelligent than humans, but he is convinced that the existence of aliens is not a contradiction with the Catholic faith.
Many people believe that the governments and religious institutions of our modern world are creating a false belief about aliens, and that they're going to try and huddle us in to a fake alien invasion so that we can fall asunder a sort of new world order. The next clip will be of Dr. Carol Rosin, a student under the late Nazi scientist Dr. Werner von Braun, who was assimilated into American government after World War II through Project Paperclip to be an employee under our government. And he was one of the pioneers of the modern rocket industry and rocket science. Towards the end of his life, he would warn Dr. Carol Rosin to watch out for the false idea about aliens within the government media, and that there would be an attempt of a fake alien invasion.
When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Werner von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. The strategy that Werner von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in 74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie.
All of it, he said, is a lie.
And now again, the reason why governments would want to do this, according to conspiracy researchers, is to issue in the New World Order, which is a term that politicians have used for quite some time.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
Never before has a new world order had to be assembled from so many different perceptions or on so global a scale. Nor has any previous order had to combine the attributes of the historic balance of power system with global democratic opinion and the exploding technology of the contemporary period.
The ARCHONs are a group of entities in which the various Gnostics wrote about. The Gnostics, or Gnosticism, is a sort of mystical Christianity that was born out of the early Christian era, which had different views than the Orthodox Church. They viewed this world or universe as being ruled by these archons, or entities in which exist in an unseen realm, actually manipulating and guiding things in our physical world. It is the belief of some conspiracy researchers that the ARCHONs are actually manipulating the politicians and rulers of this world to guide us into this enslaved system. In the following clip, we'll hear Graham Hancock explain the Gnostics and their beliefs.
At any rate, we know about the Gnostics from their own words now, because a library of Gnostic texts was found at Nag Hammadi, near Dendera in Upper Egypt. And these Nag Hammadi texts, the discovery in 1945 is quite an interesting story, actually. An Egyptian peasant is out preparing one of his fields, and he finds some earthenware jars hidden beneath a stone. And they're full of these codices, they're full of these books. And he doesn't know what they are. He takes them home. His mother burns a couple of them for kindling in the stove. And then he begins to realize they might be valuable, and they're sold out on the black market. Eventually, they're all collected together, and we now have the entire corpus of what is called the Nag Hammadi Library, which was it's very fortunate that we do, because from those we can understand what Gnosticism was really about. They knew they were being persecuted. They knew the end were coming. They hid these texts as a sort of time capsule, and it was found in 1945. Well, I'm not going to go in detail into Gnostic cosmology, but the Gnostics envisaged a realm that they called the Pleroma, which was the all. This is where God belonged, as they saw it. This was the divine. And moving in the Pleroma were the ions, the aeons. One can think of them almost like the ancient Egyptian deities, these spirits, these powers of creation. And one of them is the goddess Sophia. And Sophia envisages, she dreams, and she envisages the anthropos, she envisages mankind. And in this envisaging, she falls from the Pleroma, and a kind of cosmic accident occurs. And in her fall is created an entity called the Demiurge. And that entity, in turn, creates other entities who are called ARCHONs. They're sort of evil angels who do his bidding.
In the following clip, we'll hear researcher and author Pierre Sabac correlate the idea of the ARCHONs and the etymology of the word arc, and how UFOs are actually physical representations of these beings.
Same relationship with the Archon is also found within the Greek etymologies, and I think this is very important to emphasize, because there is this direct relationship between the Archons and ufology. In particular, this idea that the Archon is a crew member of a vessel, and that this is linked into a hierarchical, militarized structure. Now, the Archons typically are rendered or understood to be an interplanetary race. So they also fly around in arcs. Now, it's important to emphasize that the word Archon and arcs are direct cognates, so they are correspondent. This is important, but the arc is also deemed to be round or circular, because the wording arc denotes a curve or something which is curved or round. So these are
the spiritual connection.
Interesting book. This book's kind of a culmination of several of your books over the last few years, and it talks about a specific effort on the part of men to make contact with the ancient dark forces.
In the following clips, we'll hear researcher and author Tom Horn speak about the efforts of mankind to scientifically interact with the realms of the unknown and possibly these archons.
Yeah, I mean, we start in this book talking about CERN, talking about the Large Hadron Collider that sits up there on the border of France and Switzerland. And in particular we do because of something that Sergio Bertolucci, the science director at CERN, said in a media interview a while back, where he said, "We are going to open a doorway into a parallel universe." And he said, "We may send something through it," or he said, "something may come from that parallel universe into our reality." Unknown unknowns, he called them.
Well, yeah.
They made a documentary a while back in which one of the physicists is saying if gravitons are escaping into a parallel world, then once we learn how to control gravitons, how to control their spin or whatever, we can put them together like in a binary code. We can put them together in a stringed message, and we'll be able to send a message through into that parallel reality saying, we're here, come and visit us, and
we're here, come and visit us, and that.
We've gone over the idea of the government cover-up, which seeks to push us into a fake alien invasion. However, there are some that believe these beings are real, but they're not necessarily what the government or what UFOologists are trying to tell us, and that they may be entities or archons trapped in a realm, and through our scientific efforts, we may unleash them from the abyss. The following clip is from the famous Art Bell show where somebody called in, freaking out, claiming that this is the case.
On my Area 51 line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art?
Yes.
Hi. I don't have a whole lot of time.
Well, look, let's begin by finding out whether you're using this line properly or not.
Area 51.
Yeah, that's right. Were you an employee or are you now?
A former employee.
Former employee.
I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago, and I've kind of been running across the country. Oh man, I don't know where to start. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon.
So you can't spend a lot of time on the phone. So give us something quick.
Okay. Okay. What we're thinking of as aliens are they're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment, particularly the Area 51. The disasters that are coming, the military, I'm sorry, the government knows about them, and
the occult connection. Polk Runyon, a researcher, author, and practicing ritual magician, explains that magic is actually one of the oldest forms of psychology, and that when the ancient mystics or the ancient magicians were using chants, meditations, or intense rituals to summon entities or interact with the other world, they were actually accessing the deepest recess of their own subconscious mind, and that is where entities through the forms of archetypes actually exist.
But where, how, and in what form are these spirits we're summoning supposed to appear? At some time in the past, the key to the magical art had been lost.
Turn of the last century, the famous, or if you prefer infamous, magician Aleister Crowley had tried to conjure one of the Lemegeton's Goetia demons out of incense smoke. And, not surprisingly, he had very little success after a great deal of effort. Aleister Crowley did not possess the secret technique, but he certainly understood the philosophy. He stated clearly in his 1904 edition of the Goetia of the Lemegeton that the spirits of Solomon's brass vessel are portions of the human brain. I knew that magical visions were certainly hypnotic. In this respect, Crowley had been absolutely right. Solomon's genii would not come forth from caverns beneath the earth. They would rise out of the nether reaches of the deep mind. If all this magic is only in the mind, weren't those old wizards and even the modern magicians like that Crowley fellow just using their imagination? Yes, they certainly were. But the human imagination, inspired by its divine creator, is the most powerful force in the universe. A river of hopes and dreams, that bears us all along on its flowing course, from the beginning to the end of time, from planet Earth out to the farthest star. The wisdom of Solomon was proverbial. Therefore, we should not be surprised to discover that Solomon's art of magic was actually an ancient system of psychology. In the 1920s, Jung presented his revolutionary theory that beneath and beyond the personal subconscious mind, there flowed a vast, deep sea of dream images and forgotten lore. He referred to this as the collective unconscious. This mysterious psychic ocean was not the exclusive property of any individual human being. It was a dimension shared by all of us. Here one might discover the great archetypes of mythology, the heroes, the beautiful courtesans, the martyred saints, and the monstrous villains of our past. Here were the mysterious man-created gods, which Hermes Trismegistus had written about so long ago. And here were the demons of King Solomon's brass vessel. Theories by themselves do not produce results. For results, the magician still depends today, as he did thousands of years ago, on methods and techniques. Since time immemorial, magicians have placed themselves and others into states of trance, during which visions and oracles were received. We now know that this process was hypnotic, and that all the phenomenon we have come to associate with modern hypnosis was in fact known and practiced by ancient sorcerers under the guise of fascination, spellcasting, and enchantment. Jung's famous colleague, Sigmund Freud, was quick to realize the significance of what Jung had discovered, or rediscovered, and Freud was horrified by it. "Carl," he whispered, "you must not present this theory to the public, for if you do, you will release a black flood of occultism."
What Runyon was insinuating was that because entities exist inside of the subconscious mind, it is through subconscious practices that we interact with them or summon them. And as some may speculate, because we have a collective subconscious where ideas and archetypes can infiltrate and influence not just us but other people, then entities can also influence all of humanity through the subconscious mind. And maybe it is in this subconscious realm as we know it where aliens, archons, and these entities actually exist. And when we use ritual magic, we are summoning these beings into our conscious reality, into our world.
Let's talk about your podcast, Kesha and the Creepies.
I'm really into spiritual things and like the supernatural, and I'm just like, I would call myself a spiritual explorer. There are a couple books she mentioned and an app she mentioned that I immediately downloaded, and I made my family for Christmas. I was like, all I want for Christmas is us all to meditate and try to channel extraterrestrials. And they're like, okay. So I'm like trying to get all my friends and family into meditating the aliens to us. So that's my new hobby because of Demi Lovato.
So I was like, all I want for Christmas is us all to meditate and try to channel extraterrestrials. And they're like, okay. So I'm like trying to.
Conspiracy researchers have concluded that Hollywood in particular has a fascination with the occult. And in that clip that we just saw, it is apparent that they believe that aliens are not beings from another planet or galaxy, but are spiritual or interdimensional beings that require ritual magic to interact, communicate, and summon. This is a common theme within cult leaders to press their followers to believe in extraterrestrials and meditate or perform similar rituals to psychologically manipulate them and in some cases convince them to commit suicide, such as this cult leader here, Marshall Applewhite. And a lot of these cult leaders will claim to be able to channel extraterrestrials or spiritual entities, and it is these entities that give them this message.
We're going to talk to you about the most urgent thing that is on our mind, and what we suspect is the most urgent thing on the minds of those who will connect with us. We'll title this tape Planet Earth About to be Recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us. Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us.
Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us.
Aleister Crowley famously did one of these rituals and contacted I can't remember what the being was called, but it looks like a gray alien. This is before people were talking about gray aliens. Will you look that up?
Did he draw it?
He drew it. There's a drawing of it, yeah, and it looks like a gray alien. It's
what year was this?
It's like the 1800s.
Aleister Crowley was in the 1800s?
Yeah, right, 1900s.
Dude, wow, look at that drawing by Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
That does look like a gray alien.
Yeah, man.
Crowley drew this image in the early 1900s, before there were any depictions of gray aliens in modern culture, and before there were any UFO sightings or abductions in the Western world. Later on, Crowley and his associates would attempt other experiments and rituals, hoping to initiate contact with these beings. Shortly after those rituals, the world was flooded with UFO sightings and alien abductions. World-renowned researcher and authority on the UFO phenomenon, Jacques Vallée, has concluded after all of his years of research that the UFO phenomenon is not apparently caused by physical beings in physical craft, but that these craft are actually conscious manifestations from our own collective mind, or something from another realm that is akin to that.
I think what the UFO phenomenon is teaching us is that we don't understand time and space. Here are objects, I think we have to call them objects, that are physical, that interact with the environment, that cause effects on the witnesses, on the psychology and the physiology of the witnesses, and leave traces on the ground, and yet are appear to be capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what our physics understands today.
Conclusion. Now, if we take all of this information and piece it together, we can understand that there is a collective subconscious in which all of our minds interact with, and that inside this collective subconscious are archetypes which can manifest and express in our world, as Jung would have put it. And as Jacques Vallée said, the UFO phenomenon also has a consciousness aspect to it, wherein whatever these beings or entities are, apart from the obvious government, technology, and psychological operations, they are trying to manipulate our perception so that we work them into our reality. And ritual magic, psychology, and science on the quantum level are all using the same basis for their practices, and that is consciousness and how it interacts or interfaces with the universe and its varying dimensions, And in those dimensions can exist archetypes, thoughts, or entities. And whether it be through ritual magic, psychology, or quantum science, we can contact these entities and summon them into our reality